Welcome back to another episode of the B2B Founder podcast, where we help founders and business owners grow their companies from 0 to 10 million. I'm your host, Brett Trainer. David Kindlon is the CEO and co-founder of Eppione, a rapidly growing intelligent HR solutions company from Ireland. He joins me today to discuss Eppione's growth journey. I love these episodes where the founder started a company to solve a problem they were having in the workplace. This is the reason David and his co-founded Eppione to help companies turn HR administration and benefits from a chore to a competitive advantage. Their company has a lot of momentum as they're in the middle of scaling and growing globally. You'll hear about his current challenges, what he learned so far, and what he would have done differently. This is all about growth and how you can apply these lessons to your startup or your business. At the end of this, please make sure you visit our website where you can find the show notes plus the links mentioned with David. If you enjoy this podcast, please do subscribe so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, let's get this interview started. Hey, David, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brett. Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you coming all the way from balmy Ireland, right? At this time of year, as we were talking off here.
It's beautiful. Actually, we've been having a decent bit of sunshine for the last, probably the last 10 days, which is pretty rare. But yeah, as I said before we came on, I don't live here for the weather. There's lots of other reasons we live here. So.
Exactly. And we'll get into maybe some of it with the business aspect. But before we get into kind of the core of what I want to talk about, if you don't mind for the audience, just share a little bit about your background and what you're doing today. And then we'll dig into that journey a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose, look, I started my career in the insurance world. So over 20 years ago, I got my first job working for an insurance company, one of the big global leaders in insurance. A company called Allianz. I moved through the insurance industry, got some relevant experience in different parts, and then I found my niche, which was employee benefits. And I became an employee benefits and financial advisor in the consulting world. Again, working with companies in different parts of Ireland, different shapes and sizes. And yeah, over a period of time, kind of ventured on into dealing with companies in the UK, so between London and Manchester and various places, and picked up some global experience along the way as well. So that was my background. And what we're doing today is it's the technology to the front of that that we've built out. So we've built out Eppione, which is a fully functioning HRIS with an integrated employee benefits and people analytics modules. So we bring the power of technology to these employers that historically I've worked with, all to do with their HR function, their employee benefits, and people analytics.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love these stories of folks that came kind of from the corporate side. There's a problem that needed addressing and you couldn't get it solved for yourself. So you know what, I'm going to go start a company and fix it. I know you guys are growing rapidly. And it's one of the reasons I want to have you on the podcast, as if there's longtime listeners, which we do have longtime listeners. It's a little bit all about the growth and the journey for these B2B companies. And we've had founders that have, crossed that threshold, began to scale. But what I find is fascinating is getting a firsthand account from founders that are in it right now. So before we kind of get into that, the detail that, maybe take a step back and say, hey, how did you go from working on the corporate side to, hey, I've got an idea for a company, and then launching the company? Because I think a lot of people have ideas, but never really act on it. So I'd love to hear kind of the origin story of Eppione.
Yeah, I suppose, bringing it back a number of years. So I suppose going back to kind of 2016, I'm servicing a number of clients, and a lot of pain points in the industry was all to do with the administration around benefits and getting access to the data that's required. So if you've got a group life insurance plan or group income protection, group medical insurance for your employees, you need to be able to access your data. And unfortunately, the mid-market is hugely under-catered for in the HR tech space in both Ireland and the United Kingdom. So I looked at it and said, well, how could we bring a technology solution to the table that would both benefit the customers, but also benefit us? Because it means that if we gave them a platform that they could use, they could populate their data. And then when we call them and say, hey, Brett, send us over your renewal data, which is name, address, date of birth, and all the other details that we need to complete the renewal process. They have it at the touch of a button because we've provided that technology to do it. And, if you're a multi-billion-dollar business and you can afford the services of the big guys, Mercer, Willis Towers Watson, and all these guys, and you can afford the HR tech platforms, the SAPs, the Oracles, the Workdays of this world, to build you a bespoke platform to work across multi-jurisdictions. So, if you've got a population in the United States and you've got some people in Europe and maybe people in Singapore and Australia, it's very difficult to find a platform that will actually service those needs across all those territories. So we actually decided, well, what we want to do is we want to go after those larger mid-market companies, but we want to stay away from the enterprise level for now. I'm not saying we won't go there, but we may in due course. We wanted to build out a solution that would work. So I was thinking about this, and I was following some stuff that was going on in the US, a couple of different platforms that had grown out of nowhere. And I said, right, okay, I want to do this, and I want to go for global domination. I live on the island of Ireland, population 5 million, thereabouts, and our next door neighbours in the United Kingdom, there's 60 million people on the island. So I said, right, we'll start with Ireland, UK. So I have a connection who's now my co-founder. Neil Fallon is his name. And Neil was also an employee benefits guy based in the UK. And myself and Neil worked together on a lot of various accounts where he serviced business for me in the UK. So my Irish clients had people on the ground in the UK. He would facilitate that, do the advice piece, do the placement, all that kind of stuff. So myself and Neil started to talk. And I used to reciprocate and do stuff for the UK companies he had that had a presence in Ireland. So we used to talk over, a couple of beers on a sunny day, saying, we need to do something together. Let's open up our own business together. And we threw technology into the mix, and that's where the conversation started about the technology. But then we soon realized that, look, we can do the regulatory piece. We can set up the brokerage. We can get the licenses from the various regulators. We can do all that because that's what we know, and that's the space we operate in. But we were missing the technology piece. So both Neil and I had met Ernest Legrand, who's based in New York. And so, funny story about Ernest, I called Ernest one day from London, and I told him I was going to be in New York the following Wednesday, and could I buy him lunch? And he said, absolutely, yeah, what time? So we set up a time, said I'd come back and confirm a location. And then as soon as I hung up the call, I had to book my flights because I had never intended on being in the US. But I wanted to sit with the guy, and I just wanted to tell him about what we wanted to do. So I approached Ernest, but it was different. It was myself and Neil had agreed we put money into this. We also then convinced Ernest to put money into it too. So it wasn't about myself and Neil putting money in and Ernest building the product. It was about bringing the three of us together as equal business partners to build out what the dream was, and the dream was the platform. So I suppose that's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but that's where we started.
Now it makes sense. And I love the approach with the kind of the co-founder looking for complementary strengths, right? Because I think a lot of the time we see the two things, and we were talking a little bit off air, some of these co-founder relationships don't work when you don't share the same vision for what you're trying to get to. So before you started building, was there some time just making sure you guys were aligned, or did that come together pretty quick that you all were looking at kind of the same outcome?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, three of us are at different stages of our life. Myself and Neil will be quite close in age, and Ernest is a little bit ahead of us, and his kids are grown up. The vision was always, let's build something incredible and let's go and see what we can do with it. Obviously, let's go for global reach and see where we go. As I always say, if you reach for the stars and you land on the clouds, it's not a bad place to be, right? Mm-hmm. So the three of us agreed, yes, we want to build something. Yes, we want to scale it. And talking about having your co-founders complement what you do. I have some serious strengths in comparison to Neil and Ernest, but likewise, both of those guys have serious strengths that would be probably my weaknesses. It's great to have your co-founders that actually complement you, but communication is key. And advice that I would give to anyone looking to start a business who's looking to bring in fellow co-founders or whatever the case might be, make sure that you complement each other. Because the more you complement each other, the more people find, oil and water will always find its own level. And if everyone can do the same thing, you're going to have that, people are going to clash. The relationship is vital. And we're very lucky. We've got myself, Ernest and Neil, we've got a fantastic relationship. I mean, we've all stayed in each other's houses when we've traveled. As I said, I'm based in Ireland full-time. Neil's in London full-time. Ernest is based in New York full-time. So, when we do travel, we do try and stay with each other in our homes. So our families have got to know each other and all that kind of stuff. And that's important. It helps with things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, that's what I kind of love about this story is you started with the kind of that vision, the dream, and maybe we can get a little tactical. It said, all right, you guys have met, you're on board, you're going. Now, did you build a prototype first, or did you do some pre-selling with some of the network? Can you just kind of walk us through
Yeah.
how did you get up and walking?
So I suppose, well, the initial part was, okay, well, look, we've got this great idea, but what happens if we build something and nobody uses it?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that does, unfortunately, that Brett, you know as well as I do, that does happen. People have these ideas that they kind of go, no, we can do this, we can make it work, and then they go to market and nobody wants to use it. So
Right.
we looked at it and said, okay, what do we need to do? So we went and we actually identified our target market. We went and spoke to some of those companies. So both myself and Neil had clients that we were working with at the time. So we were able to talk to those guys and say, look, if somebody was to bring a product to market that did this, and this, is this something that would interest you? And again, we were pushing an open door because an awful lot of these businesses were using Excel spreadsheets and filing cabinets.
Okay.
So having those early on kind of conversations, they were like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so some of these companies that came on board as early users, and thankfully they're still with us today. And they've obviously benefited from the money that we've invested in the platform since we built the first version 1, we'll call it, right up to where we are today, which is, I mean, if you were to ask me back in 2016 what this would look like, I would never have envisaged the animal that we've created that sits in our technology. It's incredible, so powerful.
Yeah, interesting. Now, would you guys consider yourself maybe you have to for valuations a technology company, or are you a services company, or have you gone that far to define it yet?
Look, we're technology to the front, and those services fall in behind, and we're having a lot of success at the moment with companies where we're going in with the technology that's opening the door, and we're new and we're fresh and we're brilliant, and we can do things that other people can't do, and we're more affordable than those big guys that I mentioned earlier on. So we're having great success where we go in with the technology, and then we pick up the benefits and we pick up the insurance piece as well. So it's but we're very much a technology to the front business. And from a calculating valuation perspective, I suppose at the moment it's a blend because there's income coming in on both sides. However, where we see our income in the future is definitely from the SaaS, the platform side of the business.
Yeah, but to your point, you got to be kind of differentiated, right? 'Cause somebody can come in and copy the technology over time. It's what are you doing to the rest to provide those services? No, I love these type of businesses and seeing more and more of that. I just had somebody on recently, Erica Bischoff, who's I would call, I don't know if I like the word modernizing an old industry, but in essence, she's doing with trade associations. I had Nicole Wood on, who's taking a whole new approach to coaching, right? And kind of light and wellness that, because everybody's done it the same way forever and ever. And then you find a better way or a new way, not just new, but I think it does have to be better to do it. But
yeah, and look, at the insurance industry the world over, whether it's property and casualty insurance or it's the placement of benefits, it's a very, very, the technology that's used in that industry, it's a very outdated tech stack. And, if you look at the insurance companies, they're usually an amalgamation of 5 or 6 different huge organizations that have come together. You picture, a huge amount of technology servers that are all duct taped together with wires coming out of one end to the other. And they find it difficult to get the data out of their own tech. So trying to connect to external tech is quite difficult for them at the moment. But where we'd like to see where we go with our business, and we're having conversations with some of these providers at the moment, and we're having conversations with different third parties who already have integrations with some of the carriers, is we hold a lot of the information in our platform that's needed to help with the renewal process or even the underwriting process for different types of schemes. So what we want to do is we want to connect that so you can have that end-to-end solution from quotation to purchase to renewal. It's all done, and the client doesn't have to get stuck and bogged down in producing heavy data, and nobody gets missed and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of our journey, is the whole connectivity piece and living in that connected world, which is fantastic. And the insurance companies and the carriers, they're doing their best to modernize what they have. It's a costly, timely exercise for those guys.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the truth. I mean, we shared a little bit offline, 30 years bounce back and forth between enterprise B2B and startup. And these bigger, larger B2B companies are going to have a really hard time pivoting into the digital first, which was coming, but the pandemic basically shut the door on it's coming and it's here. And trying to modify what you have in order to align with the buyer's preferences be really difficult, where if you could build it from scratch, right, to build it differently, definitely has the competitive advantage. And like I said, that's
Yeah.
what I like about these stories of lived it. You had the problem, you figured it, thought about how to solve it, and then you took action.
Yeah, well, and just on that, I suppose, just to dig a little bit deeper into one of the problems that we can solve, there is a HR tech platform which will remain anonymous, so I won't drop their name in it. But if you're a customer of theirs in the United States, they have their tech stack in the United States, and if you then have people working for you as a US business in, let's say, the United Kingdom or Singapore, they're different tech stacks that you're using. And the big issue is that those tech stacks don't talk to each other. So if you have a population of 1,000 people working for you as a business and they're in, let's say, 4 or 5 different countries, if you're using different tech stacks in those countries, yes, the name above the door is the same. However, from a reporting perspective, from a
Wow.
benefits rollout, from all that kind of stuff, you actually can't see. So you actually have to go in and understand your data. And because those tech stacks, because they're siloed, they're usually an amalgamation of different tech stacks. So there could be 2 or 3 companies in the UK that came together. They brought the best of their tech, stuck it all together, and it sits there. But it's completely different tech and completely different data fields that you might have in the US version of what is seen as the same business. And what we've done is we've actually built out the ability. So if you're a company based headquartered in the United States, and just for clarity, our target market are companies between 250 and 2,500 employees. Okay.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because we see that they're hugely undercatered for in this space. But if they have multiple jurisdictions that they operate in, we can do everything from the simple things like, if you've got people who are based in New York and they've got different types of annual leave entitlement, to the people who are based in Scotland or the people who are based in Madrid in Spain, you can configure the platform for those offices and those locations for those people. And the same you can do with the benefits. Okay, so the employee benefits in each of those jurisdictions and locations are going to be very different. In the United States, you're going to have your 401k and your health plan. You're going to have your life cover and maybe your income protection. In Spain, in different parts of Europe, you've got different mandatory benefits. So from a compliance perspective, you need to be able to make sure that your mandatory benefits are in place. We help with all that. But again, the
Okay.
reporting side of it can be done from HQ or from any administrator on the platform. They can go in and run the analytics part of our platform, which will give them all of that information that they need. So it's the ability to use the platform wherever you go. And client doesn't have to come to us and say, "Hey, Dave, we're after opening up an office in Singapore. Can you add Singapore to the platform?" They do it themselves. They upload the data, they go in and tweak the system, they configure it, they can push out benefits that are only relevant to those people in Singapore. They can push out benefits that are across the organization to everybody. And it's about giving the power to the employer to be able to tweak the system to make it work for them. And that's where we saw it was missing.
Yeah, and I think from a timing perspective, I mean, I think we were heading remote and global anyway, but I think we're just at the beginning of, right, if people are going to work remote, one, they don't have to live in the cities anymore, right? They also don't have to live in North America. You could be hiring folks across the globe, and I've had founders that are doing that with remote work. So the old systems would be really difficult to kind of manage a global workforce, right? Regardless of
Yeah.
if they're country specific or a bunch of independents that you have now coming together. So
Yeah.
interesting. So I wanted to ask you, as you guys started to get going, you had the idea, you talked to some early customers about what they were looking for and would that be beneficial. So I'm just curious, did you make any pivots after you had the first few customers up and running? Did you learn anything that kind of
Oh,
fundamentally changed? I'm sure you did, but anything
yeah.
material?
How long do you have? Yeah, look, I mean, it's been a huge learning curve all along the way. I mean, we've developed relationships with partners where they've brought clients to the table and stuff like that, and we've learned a huge amount from it. Yeah, I suppose, as I said, I mean, if you were to ask me back in 2016, 2017, what this would look like in 2021, the vision I had back then versus the reality today are poles apart. And I mean, my vision from 2016 probably stopped about 2 versions ago. So we've done so much more since then. And yes, we've learned a huge amount. Have we pivoted? I mean, look, we did something totally, not totally separate. It's part of Eppione. But back when COVID hit, we had some companies who came to us and they were like, look, we're essential service. We need to remain open, and we need to screen our employees every day. Do you have a temperature? Are you waiting a test result? All that kind of stuff. And we were asked, can we configure that in the platform? And the answer was like, yeah, look, there's a workaround, but it's not ideal. But we'll actually build something separate. So we did. So within 4 weeks, we had a prototype of what we call screenin.me. We released it, and we've got companies in the United States. We've got companies in Ireland, the UK, using this platform on a daily basis. We've got a school here in Ireland who are using it with the students, where the parents go in every day and answer all the questions. And again, there's reporting functionality behind that. So it wasn't a pivot from we get away from the HR stuff. This was an addition, and that product will have a life after COVID, because it can be used for, I suppose it's like a questionnaire tool. You can push it out to your employees. They can go in and fill it in on their mobile phone, and it can populate back in, and you can run reports off it. So that was one pivot we did back when COVID happened, and it was great. It opened so many doors. We're doing business with some sizable operators in the United States. Unfortunately, the contract prohibits from mentioning names. Unfortunately,
Sure.
the usual. But great experience of doing something different.
Yeah, but still tying back to the customer experience and delivering on that value. And now that you're 5 years or so into this product, just curious, is there anything you would have done differently, right, as you learned going through this process, and maybe share with some other founders that are in the earlier stages of the company?
Yeah, I think. Is there anything we would have done differently? I think it would have been good to take money a little bit earlier. We were never really in a hurry to take money, and we wanted to take the right money, and that was a journey in itself. But we got some great money on board, some great advisors around us, which has all worked out good. Would we have done things differently? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because one thing, and we're raising money at the moment, and it's time. You run out of time very, very quickly as an individual. So if I could carbon copy myself, Neil and Ernest, and some of the rest of the team that work with us, I think I'd double the workforce. Have a carbon copy of everybody running around. But taking money on earlier would have helped us resource and maybe free up more of my time for me to focus on selling and getting out there quicker. But look, I've no regrets. We've no regrets on it. We're very happy where we are at the moment, and things are thankfully going quite well for us at the moment, which is great.
Yeah, no, the expansion into different countries. So yeah, you obviously pulled and pushed the right buttons. But yeah, it's kind of
Yeah,
a common tale with founder or co-founders, right? That it's how long are we in the day-to-day and the bottleneck of everything in the business before we bring additional, and there's a balance to it, right? Because you bring in too many people too early, you don't have necessarily the cash flow to do it. The other thing I hear a lot of and read and research is, founders that bring a bunch of money in early, but they don't really have a plan for it, right? And you don't use it efficiently. And so that, that part of my corporate world says, man, you give me, $2, I'm going to figure out how to maximize those $2. But a lot of founders don't necessarily have
yeah.
that
Yeah, they go,
discipline.
but what I've seen a lot of as well is people go out and raise a lot of money. They hire a lot of people, but their the product isn't quite right. I suppose, yeah, it's quite easy. You can blow through money. You take the money in, it'll always, people's pockets don't refuse money. So if you're out there with money in your pocket to spend, people will take it from you.
Yeah, right.
So
Exactly. Make sure you have a plan. That's always my advice. Make sure you know what
absolutely,
you want to do with it. And
absolutely, yeah.
just curious too, I'm a process guy at heart. So, again, this is one of those balances of too much process and rigor too early is probably not the right thing. But as you start to scale the business, you've got to have the repeatable process. So when did you guys start to add, or are you in the process of adding to some processes? And again, it's specifically more around the go-to-market than it is.
Yeah, I suppose, Brett, I mean, coming from and being involved and still being part of a highly regulated industry, Processes have always been at the front of what we do. So, the regulator here in Ireland, the Central Bank of Ireland, or the FCA in the UK, there's a huge amount of processes that you have to follow with regard to, customers and how you sell. So we've always had that. But I suppose, from the tech side of things, from the selling of the tech, I suppose we've tried different sales ideas and different ways to do things, and some have worked, some have been horrendously bad. And look, you live and learn. And if you get through your working week and you haven't learned anything, well, you haven't tried anything new. So it's yeah. Look, I suppose we're still in the process from that side of things. We're still implementing processes to get there. But we've got a lot of good processes in place. But where we'll raise the money, it'll help us scale quicker. If we just carry on doing what we're doing, we'll become a solid business. No doubt about it. The organic growth that we've had over the last couple of years, we're doing quite well. By taking in the money, it's going to help us accelerate that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe another good segue for me. Say, all right, so like I said, you got good traction. You've got footprints now in 6 countries.
We're in Ireland. We're in Ireland. We're in the UK. So we've offices in Dublin in Ireland. We've offices in Manchester and London in the UK, and we have an office in Perth in Australia.
Oh, God, that's
and right. We are going into the United States in Q3 of this year. So Ernest is based in New York. So we'll be launching it. We'll be incorporating in the US September, say Q4.
Gotcha. Oh, it's going to get exciting if it hasn't been already. I mean, again, it's always interesting to me to have these conversations and hear from founders because, again, there's that balance of how quickly do you go, right? There's that philosophy, let's raise $200 million and just blanket the globe. That rarely works, right? So I appreciate the approach that you guys are being calculated with it, and
our technology has to change and has to adapt to different territories. Like for example, in the United States, I mean, you guys have a term called COBRA, which relates to your health insurance. So it's the ability to take your health insurance plan with you when you leave an employer, or an employer lets you go and lets you take it with you. So we've had to adapt for that. There's no other market in the world that actually has that process. So we've had to adapt the platform to make sure that it caters for that. So there's lots of other smaller bits and pieces that have to be done in the way things are structured to give clients the ability to switch on and switch off different parts of the platform that are fit for them in their territory, even terminology. So there's lots of things. Flying to the United States and saying we are here with money in your back pocket it's one way to fail, but it can work out sometimes for people too, right?
Yeah.
you do hear stories of people just landing and kind of going, I'm here, and it takes off like a rocket ship for them, but it has to be a bit calculated and there's got to be a strategy behind it. So I suppose we've taken our time on it.
No, which is fantastic. And you talked about the fundraising, and I know that's a big thing for a lot of early stage founders as they're thinking about fundraising. So any advice or recommendations as you've gone through this, maybe again, as you do differently, or just?
Look, I suppose, there's lots of money out there at the moment. There's a huge amount of money. I always say you got to try and find the right money. So just because someone's willing to give you money, until you see the deal sheet, until you see the T's and C's that they're gonna throw on the table, I would say look for the right money, because it's the people behind the money that can bring value add. And we've some great people behind us where I could pick up the phone. I spoke to 2 of them yesterday. I could pick up the phone and have a conversation. Just say, look, I'm thinking, I've got something in my head. I want to blurt it out. I want to have a conversation, and they're at the other end of the phone. So it's important that you get the support. And look, I know as businesses grow and as you get into your professional investors, your private equity, your Series A or Series B, things might change. But again, a lot of those guys bring huge supports to the table as well. So
yeah,
it's not just about the money. It's about the people behind the money and the supports they can bring.
I think it's such a great point. And too often, I think founders just settle for somebody that's willing to invest, right? Versus looking at it from a strategic, and maybe sometimes there are no other options, but to your point, there's a lot of capital out there now. And I think the other thing that sometimes founders underestimate is when they take on capital, it changes the timing, right? The pressure is a little different when it's your co-founders, and if you guys are bootstrapped, or at least friends and family or angels, to now you've taken somebody else's money, the clock accelerates. So you've got to be ready. I don't know if pressure is the right word. Maybe it is pressure, but a different timeline with different stakeholders than maybe what you were used to.
You become answerable to people. So when someone picks up the phone and asks you a question, you have to answer it. You know? Right. So it's
that.
Yeah. So pick the right money. Don't be in a hurry. That'd be my advice. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Before I get to my last question that I ask everybody, anything else? I mean, I've loved this conversation, right? And I love these types of stories to hear from folks that are, in the fire as we speak and growing. Any other advice for people thinking about starting a company or that are in the process that you'd share?
Yeah. Don't be afraid of competition. Don't be afraid of, don't be afraid of talking about your idea, because I hear so often, I hear people, if I tell people and talk about it, people will copy my idea. I remember back in our early days, myself and Neil actually we did a presentation to a room full of people, and it was actually a friend of ours whose wife was at the airport who had been at the same conference and overheard these two guys kind of going, those guys in Eppione are onto something. I think we're just going to copy what they're doing and do it ourselves. And they never did, but there was a conversation that they had at the airport. Someone overheard it, and it's like, oh, do you know what? I actually took that as a compliment, and I was like, I actually laughed to myself, kind of going, well, I've been through the build, so I know the frustrations and the pain to get to where we're getting to, where we've come to. Best of luck to those guys starting from scratch and then trying to understand why the system does what it does. Because I suppose the best example of that, myself and my mother-in-law, we did a cooking course together. So I mentioned earlier on, my darling wife is from Australia, and we met her mom in Thailand on a holiday years ago, and it was my kind of first holiday away with my in-laws, and myself and herself went and did a cooking course. And in the cooking course, we were given the same ingredients. We were told how to cook the food the exact same way. And lo and behold, my food was terrible. Her food was awesome. So we did a cooking course, and I ate all her food because it was amazing. So just because you have the same ingredients or you have the same technology doesn't mean that the end result is the exact same. So don't be afraid of competition. Competition is always good. Competition is healthy. Just because you're first doesn't mean that you're going to win. Facebook wasn't the first social media platform. Look at them now. I mean, you've TikTok, they own Instagram, but all the other stuff that came along thereafter. And so don't be afraid to tell people your story and ask people for their advice, because if you don't ask for advice, you won't get it.
Yeah, it's such good advice too. And it is all about execution, right? The idea is everybody's got an idea, but can you execute against it? And frankly, if you tell somebody your idea and they can execute better than you, maybe you weren't in the right business, right? To begin with.
As a very good friend of mine says, ideas are cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's execution is key. So it's about joining the dots and putting the building blocks in place to make it happen.
Yeah. So to your point too, first movers sometimes win. Most of the time they don't. It's who can execute better, and that's why I spend a lot of time with founders. Is it's about execution, and one of the stats. There's two stats that I use all the time, and it's kind of what drives me is 10% of all startups get to $1 million in revenue, and only 1 out of 100 get to 10 million. And people are like, well, it's a passion project or a side hustle, and that's why I didn't get to 10. But when I look at only 10% of the $1 million companies get to 10 million, that's where I have a problem, because as to get to even get to $500,000 in revenue, $1 million in revenue is really hard. You're doing some things right. You've got customers. There's no reason why you can't get to 10. And it's about execution, because there's so many different moving pieces you have to get right going through it. But so again, that's why with this podcast is why I do is, to help more people that have the good ideas and just execute just a little bit better to get to that 10 million mark.
Yeah. Just to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Easier said than done. I know. And obviously the data proves that, but one company at a time. So
yeah, absolutely. And look, and we're still very much in our early journey. So we'd love to blow this out of the park and get to 10 million, get to 20 million, get to 50 million in revenues. That's the dream. And, I think I said before we came on, look, global domination. We want to be a market leader in what we do. And we're not just going to settle for Ireland, UK, Australia. We're looking at the US. We want to go global with this. That's the dream.
Well, we need the help. I mean, our benefits and insurance is not exactly highly efficient at the moment. So, yeah, I definitely, there's room for you here
And
to come in
there's
and
lots of,
do that.
there is this huge opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I always like to end every interview with the one question is, what is one thing you, David, would highly recommend? And this could be personal, professional, something that's just important to you.
Always make time for family and friends. If it's one thing I've learned from the pandemic. I mean, pre-pandemic, I spent a lot of time on airplanes and traveling around the world, and I enjoyed it. It was great. But what I've learned through the pandemic is that there's more to life, and you got to look after your loved ones, and whether that's immediate family. I'm married with small kids, and I've got to do the school run. If I wasn't at my desk at 7 o'clock in the morning, I was on a flight at 6:30 out of Dublin Airport. I didn't get to see them. Whereas the last 18 months, I've got to spend a huge amount of time with them. From getting up in the morning to going to bed at night, and it just showed me the importance of family. And working and putting blood, sweat, and tears into a business. It's great, and the end result could be phenomenal. But you need to enjoy life at the same time. So just always make time for family and friends.
No, I love that. And you're right. I think a lot of people have learned that you can do both, right? You can have a family and spend time and still build a high growth business, right?
And look, and then it boils down. Look, I say family and friends because there's lots of people out there who are on their business journey who they don't have an immediate family. They may still be single, or they may not have kids or a partner, or whatever the case might be. So your circle of friends, and it's because it's your escape. It's your outside of work. It's your Zen place. It's your happy place, and that's important to have that. And whatever that is, and it doesn't have to be family and friends. Maybe your Zen place is climbing a mountain on your own. Like, make time for you. Do what makes you happy in your spare time, because sitting at a desk for 16 hours a day is not going to do you any good, and it could put you in an early grave.
Yeah, no, 100%. I 100% agree with that. And I think you'll be more productive if you do kind of separate those two.
Absolutely.
So, well, David, thank you very much. And if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to learn more about you, the company, and connect?
Yeah, they can contact us through eppione.com. That's EPPIONE.com. Send an email through to support, and the guys in support will send it through to me. Or you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. So David Kindlon, Kindlon. You'll find me there, and I'll be delighted to connect and have conversations. And if anybody wants to reach out for a chat, always up for a chat and a conversation.
Awesome. And folks, it's well worth your time if you can catch some time with David. So he's been very generous, not only on this podcast, but our talks prior to this. So if you don't mind, I'd love to check back in with you another, 12 months or so, just to see where you are on the journey. And I think people would be interested to hear, how it's going. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, that'd be great, Brett. Yeah, anytime. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And hopefully someday we'll have a beer. That'll be better again.
I think we're getting closer, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and and I'll come to Ireland. I know you said the weather's not spectacular, but I'll take my chances.
Yeah. Look, you won't get wet sitting on a bar stool.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, thanks again, David. Have a great rest of your day. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Brett. Take care.